Hey, you guys. I don't know what happened. I was live and then it kind of cut out. So I am going to have to start this over. Today, we're talking about having a plan to avert migraine attacks naturally. I'm going to give it a few moments again for people to have a chance to hop on live if they can. So while people are hopping on, I am just going to ask you how your month's been going. How, if you have kids in school, how that's been going for you. Our kids are in virtual school. It is a little bit of a challenge because a lot of things are new, and I, feel especially for the teachers and the parents actually helping their kids do this. All in all, for me, it's just been a bit of an inconvenience. So I really can't complain. I am, used to having my own space, and having kids around 24/7 for the last 7 months is sometimes feels like a lot, but you know what? Virtual school is what made sense for us. We are happy to be spending more time together in a lot of ways. So I'm not going to say anything to kind of offset the benefits that we have gained from that time together. Let me know though if anybody else is feeling stressed by the change in situation, having to deal with kids either at home learning or going to school, and some of the anxiety that can come from that. I know nowadays if your child gets a sniffle or a runny nose, they're being sent home and you have to do testing. So that can disrupt a lot of things. So let me know in the comments if you feel like this is causing you some anxiety or potentially even worsening migraines or more migraines. I don't think we have anyone watching right now, but if you are on, please let me know that you're here. Let me know where you're watching from. And if you're watching the replay, let me know you're watching the replay and give it a thumbs up if you like what you're hearing. So yeah, let's get into it. Once again, having a plan in place for migraine episodes is what we're talking about today. Let me know in the comments if you have a plan for your migraine attacks. Do you have something set up where you know what you're going to be doing when an attack is coming on? So type yes or no in the comments. Let me know if you have a plan in place. If the majority of people say no, they don't have a plan, then great, I know what to kind of focus more on. And if you do have a plan, let me know how that's going for you. So in my experience, not that many people do have a plan in place, or if you're like me, you may have a plan, but you're either, finding that it's not working that well, or you're not actually implementing it when the time comes, or you're not implementing it soon enough. So as for that last point, I am going to describe the phases of migraine in this live because I want you to understand that there are different phases and that there's a difference as to when you bring your plan into place. And then the effectiveness of that plan is dependent on when you're bringing it in. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to let you know my thoughts on why it's important to have a plan, and then ultimately what you should be bringing into your plan, what kinds of things you can be including. So the four main phases of migraine are the prodrome phase, the Auraphase, the attack phase, or some people know it as the episode phase or headache phase, and then finally the postdrome phase. So the prodrome phase is the 2 to 24, actually it can be up to 2 days before you actually get the head pain that you have that first phase of migraine. And then the Auraphase, well, that's a phase that if you do experience the Auraphase, because not everybody does, you'll know, because that's where you have the visual disturbances. So for some people that's zigzagging lines or just bright flickering lights, or you have potentially even blind spots in your vision. So that's making it very hard to, obviously you can't drive if you experience this, you have trouble, reading things. So usually work has to come to a halt if you do experience aura. And then moving into the attack or episode phase, that's when the head pain usually starts. And then those classic migraine symptoms of nausea and vomiting, sensitivity to noise, lights, smells, mood changes like irritability. So that's usually the phase that we're most familiar with because of the head pain and those common symptoms. Then lastly, we have the postdrome phase. So this is otherwise known as the migraine hangover, and that's the 24 to 48 hour period after the attack phase actually completely ends or resolves. So let me know in the comments if you realized that there were multiple phases to migraine, and perhaps you knew about the Auraphase and the attack phase specifically, but you weren't aware of the prodrome or postdrome phase. So having a plan means knowing in advance what you're going to do when you feel a migraine coming on. It's the tactics and tools that you use to manage symptoms, or even what you use to prevent an attack. So as you can imagine, just like the rule of thumb with meds, the key here is to bring these things in as early as possible, ideally before the attack phase. And it requires you to be aware of your prodrome symptoms. If you aren't able to catch things in that phase or early on in the attack phase, that's when you'll find maybe symptoms worsening, and the duration of your migraine may end up being longer than it may have been otherwise. And then you have to have an actual plan for the attack phase, and your Auraphase, your attack phase, and your postdrome phase if you're not catching things in that prodrome phase. As far as recognizing symptoms in that prodrome phase, some of them can be kind of elusive, especially if they're not severe, they're kind of mild. You might not be noticing them, but if you start paying attention and looking for things like extreme tiredness, or just even difficulty concentrating or thinking, if you experience mild nausea or some dizziness, changes in mood, I've heard that one a lot from people, that they'll find that they become more irritable before a migraine attack comes on. And then again, the sensitivity to light, smell, and noise, that can start up in the prodrome phase. And some that you may not be aware of that are quite common, but people don't really acknowledge, is constipation. And I know I mentioned tiredness, but for some people it's actually an excess of energy. So they feel very energized and energetic leading up to an attack. So that's a little bit of an odd one, because it's maybe not something that you would ever attribute. So as with everything, it's bio-individual. Your symptoms are not going to be the same as somebody else's. So you just kind of have to pay attention to it. And even, some people, I've read some people saying that they even get like puffy eyelids before their attack comes on, or insomnia. They can't sleep. And that's kind of a sign that things are starting up for them. So if you can start to become more aware of these prodrome symptoms, it's a window of opportunity for you to actually avert the attack from happening altogether. And of course, all the awful symptoms that come with it. So now we'll talk a little bit about the purpose of having a plan. So the purpose of having a plan, it might seem obvious to most of you, but it does change based on the phase of migraine. So in the prodrome phase, well, it's about, averting an attack, but if you're already into the attack phase, then it becomes more about symptom management, as well as trying to just reduce the length and the severity of your symptoms. So if you bring something in that phase, then it may mean that you have a 1-day migraine rather than 2 or 3 day migraine, or that you can actually function and go out and do things rather than be completely incapacitated. So the, importance of having a plan is pretty consistent across the board. We don't want to be researching things or running out to the store, or even curling up into a ball doing nothing. Having a plan, it's empowering, and it gives us back a sense of control, and it actually calms the anxiety and the stress that may come with some of those symptoms that we're noticing, and then the head pain that starts, and then we just get more anxious about it, and it can create worse symptoms, really. So having a plan will just gives you that whatever stress might be coming along with the anxiety of it, it calms things down, and may actually make all of your symptoms a little bit less severe. So I know that for me, when I was aware of the prodrome phase, and before I had a plan, I'd start to get the head pain, and then I'd either grab an ice pack, take medication, and I'd usually fall into bed, or if I was at work, I'd take medication. If I didn't have medication, I'd still push through without it, and I'd stay at work. But if I did that, either I would lose 3 days of of work altogether because I'd end up having to pack it in and my migraine would last multiple days, or I would stick it out, but my work productivity and quality of work would suck. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what to include in your plan for the prodrome or early phases of a migraine attack. So number one is hydration. So I know this one seems simple, but we all have those days where we forget to drink enough water. We don't get enough liquids into us. And with dehydration being a major cause of, it's a cause for migraine attacks. It's one of the major triggers. So we have to consider it. We have to consider if we drank enough water, if we had, herbal teas, if we ate enough fruit, and then if we, on top of that, had coffee. If we did not have enough liquids and then also had coffee, well, that's very dehydrating in itself. For every cup of coffee, you need 2 cups of water to kind of offset the dehydrating effects of it, the diuretic effect. So that's something that we have to just be aware of. And then that's kind of your first phase. Ask yourself if you've had enough water. The second tactic is to think about food. It's to think about when you last ate, what you last ate. If it was more than 4 hours ago, then you may be dealing with low blood sugar. If you had a very refined meal, like refined carbohydrates for that last meal, if you didn't combine your fat, fiber, and protein, then you may have the blood sugar issue. So in this case, if you suspect this is a problem, and if you're not too nauseous and you can actually stomach some food, then this is where you want to bring in some carbs with a fat and or protein. So don't reach for sugar, and know that sugar cravings can be a symptom of your migraines. So you want to bring in a snack like veggies and hummus, or almond butter with apple slices, or unsweetened coconut yogurt with berries and hemp seeds. So something that's combining that carb, fat, and protein ideally. The number 3 thing to consider at first signs of migraine is caffeine, surprisingly. So I'm sure some of you know this works for you. Some people can avert an attack by having a cup of coffee or 2 shots of espresso or a few cups of black tea. So having that amount of caffeine is enough for some people to actually avert their attack. So the only caveat to that is if you know that you're reliant on caffeine or you're addicted, then this is probably not the strategy for you, because it could be what is bringing on your migraines, or it would potentially make it worse. So number 4 is ginger. Ginger is anti-inflammatory. I'd love to hear from you if you already incorporate ginger into your own protocols. Let me know if you use ginger, because it's fantastic for, as we know, nausea, but it's also been studied and it's been shown to actually be able to avert migraine attacks. So the ways that you can get ginger in is to drink ginger tea, or you can take a tincture or the essential oils, or a supplement. So if you're going for a supplement, something like 300 milligrams to 500 milligrams would be good. Ginger tea will give you about 250 milligrams. And as for the essential oil, you can apply it topically, you can diffuse it, and you can also ingest it, as long as you trust the oil is pure and comes from a reputable and tested brand. So if you trust that it's therapeutic grade, that it doesn't have contaminants and synthetics, then ginger essential oil should be safe to ingest. And something important you should know about ginger is that it is a mild blood thinner. So if you are on any sort of blood thinner medications, please consult with your doctor before using ginger. So moving on to number 5 is to breathe. So if your stress response is activated, or if your muscles are really tense, then taking some deep breaths can just calm the nervous system down. It can bring you out of the stress response, and actually your migraine symptoms will lessen. So it might take some practice to do this. If you emphasize the exhale And I did teach a box breathing exercise in the stress and resilience live that I did. I think it's in unit, one of the units, and I can link to it in the comments afterwards. But box breathing technique can be brought in at this point as well. And this is something that I found to be very successful. Once I got good at it, it was really effective for me. So I would highly recommend trying it. And always breathing is good. We don't all do it. We tend to breathe up here rather than lower down in our diaphragm, which is going to be more effective for releasing that stress. So number 6, tactics to bring into your plan is to use essential oils. So for me, I use a blend of peppermint, lavender, frankincense, and copaiba. These I have in a roller bottle, and I put it on my head, on my neck. I diffuse them, and I also take frankincense internally. So I put a drop on my thumb and I press it to the roof of my mouth, and that along with the roller bottle is fantastic. I also use the deep blue rub lotion on tense muscles in my neck and shoulders. That's one of my symptoms, is I get like a tense neck, tense muscles in my shoulders, and using the deep blue rub early on in the migraine, in an early phase of migraine, for me, it can actually avert attacks from happening. I've been able to avert many attacks just by using these essential oils as well as the deep blue rub. Especially now, once I got to a point where I did a lot of the underlying work, the deeper stuff, and getting to root causes of my own migraines, this sort of technique in and of itself was absolutely magical for me. So finally, I don't want to leave out to go for a walk. If you, even if you're not feeling great, and you may have the fatigue that so many people get in that prodrome phase, if you get outside in nature and go for a walk, that can do wonders. So, like I say, even if you don't absolutely feel like it, you don't have the energy, I highly recommend getting out there and trying it early on before you feel too awful. And it can increase serotonin levels, and you'll start to feel better. And if you just go and lie down in a dark room, that will actually decrease your serotonin levels. And that doesn't do you any favors. That will very likely prolong your migraine. So the last thing is probably, for most people, applying, like using cold therapy will help. So using an ice pack on your head, on your neck, cold cloth over your eyes. That's done wonders for me too. It contracts blood vessels in the head and it lessens the pain. So these things can all go into a plan. You can write it out, type it out, put it somewhere you can easily find it, and then have the tools accessible. Have them available in your house so that you can just grab them and use them when you need to, because these things will actually help you follow through with your plan. So this is it for today. I hope you found it helpful. You have some new ideas to try, and of course, adapt these suggestions to your own situation, to what works for you, but do give them a try. Try them in combination with one another. Give it a fair shot and then see how it works. If you find they're not working that well for you, don't get discouraged. You might just need some more practice. You might need some practice identifying those prodrome symptoms. You might need to be a little further along in addressing those underlying health issues. So I know that once I started working on my own underlying health issues and those root causes, these kinds of tactics started to work much better. They started to become more effective for me. So I do hope they work for you. And if you want to see things improving, if you know you've got some underlying things to address, if you want help with raising your migraine threshold, then type me in the comments, whether you're watching live or the replay, private message me, and we should chat. So that's all I've got for you today, and let me know if you have any questions. And again, please let me know if you watched, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.